When you're swinging a club, iron, driver, wedge, bend your right wrist back, bend it back more, let it throw. Bend your right wrist back, bend it back more, let it throw. Let's hit one with just that first part. So I would start with just the bending back. Just bend it back during the backswing, part number one. Bend the right wrist back almost as far as you can during the backswing and hit part one. And that's a really easy, simple feel to start with. I want to talk to you today about live view golf. Now you guys hear me say all the time that you need feedback when you're practicing. You need to know if you're actually doing what you're trying to do, and the best way to give yourself feedback ultimately is video. And not only is video the best way to give yourself feedback, but being able to see yourself simultaneously as you're doing a movement is the best form of video feedback. It's the best way I've seen to make changes in your swing and be able to correlate the differences between your feels and your reels. Live view is super easy to use and set up. Simply set it up behind or in front of you. You connect it with your iPad or phone, pop that on the ground. You can actually do your practice, see yourself as you're doing it, the best way to expedite your process. I encourage you guys to check out Live View Golf. We'll put a link in the description down below with a coupon code. Hey guys, Eric here out at the Don Law Golf Academy at beautiful Osprey Point Golf Club in Boca Raton, Florida. In today's video, we're going to talk about the right wrist basics, or the trail wrist basics. So a simplified version of what you need to know and feel with your right wrist, help compress the ball, hit the ball better, be more consistent. Now, right before we dive into that, would love for you guys to do a couple things for us. If you do like the video, click that gray like button down below. That really helps us spread our videos on YouTube to more people so we can help more golfers. I would really appreciate if you guys can do that. Subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment down below. Have you been practicing the right wrist? What are some things that have worked for you? Questions you have? Let's keep the conversation going down below. And also, I'd love for you guys to check out CogornoGolf.com. I would love to work with you, put together a specific plan based on what you want to do, how you want to improve your game. We can do all of that there. You send us in your videos. We walk you through step by step, just like if I were with you in person, showing you all the feels, what you need to focus on, the drills to do, and better than going to get a lesson once a week, we're with you. We're there 24/7. You can ask as many questions as you want along the way for a fraction of the price of in-person coaching. Would love to see you at CogornoGolf.com. Okay, so let's talk about the right wrist. Now, the purpose of this video, as some of you who have been with us have known, we've done a bunch of videos on the right wrist. We have some that are very in-depth and some that are more simple. This is designed to be a simple version. There's 3 things that you must do with your right wrist in the swing. Let's talk through it. Part number 1, your trail wrist during the backswing. The primary role or function it has is to bend back. That would be extension. That's your fingertips getting farther away from the target. That's your knuckles getting farther away from the target. So my knuckles get farther away as my wrist bone stays here, bending back. That's primary function number 1. Now there is going to be a little bit of up as well. So if your thumb out in front of you, pull your thumb up towards your right shoulder. That's radial deviation. There's going to be a little bit of that, but let's focus primarily on the bending back version. So part 1 of what I'd want you to do here is understand your right wrist should bend back pretty close to max during the backswing. So during my normal setup position, that right wrist is going to gradually bend back to the point where it's almost fully bent back. Part number 2 in transition is my right wrist is going to bend back even more. So my knuckles are going to get as close to the back of my forearm as I can get them, palm a little more away from the target or camera. So bend it more back in transition. And then I'm going to reach a point during my downswing, somewhere between hands about halfway down, hip high and last parallel, where my right wrist is as bent back as it's going to get. And at that point is when I'm starting to do the last piece, part 3, which is the throwing of it. Now, there's some timing involved here we're going to talk through, but that's the basic message I want you to take home. When you're swinging a club, iron, driver, wedge, bend your right wrist back, bend it back more, let it throw. Bend your right wrist back, bend it back more, let it throw. Let's hit one with just that first part. So I would start with just the bending back. Just bend it back during the backswing, part number 1. Bend the right wrist back almost as far as you can during the backswing and hit part 1. And that's a really easy, simple feel to start with. Now the point of bending it back is really to help lower the dynamic loft, square or close the club face, so better compression, better contact when the right wrist bends back. That's going to help get the shaft more forward, more compression, better club face control, lower dynamic loft. So bending it back during the backswing. Now, I also would add, most of the best players, you would see the trail wrist will bend more back in transition. Basically right away from the top of the backswing, it's bending more back in the transition phase. And that would be feel number 2 you'd add in. You'd bend it back pretty close to max and then a little bit more in transition. Let's go ahead and hit with that. Bend it back on the way back, bend it more back in transition. And there's another good strike there. And then the last part is the throw part. Now that might be too much for you to think about in one swing. Bend it back more, let it throw. You might have one part of that, 1.5, 2 of them. We're gonna talk through how to practice that in a minute, but all 3 would be bend it back, bend it more back, and then let it throw, and we'll talk about the timing of the throw. So here I'm gonna think, bend it back, a little bit more in transition, and then let it throw. Yeah, good. Now, the timing to some of these things. Let's start with the bending it back during the backswing part. Now, when do you bend it back? Do you bend it back right away? Do you not bend it at all, bend it late, or is it progressive? I would think of it as a more progressive movement. So if I'm theoretically at my setup and I've got no bend, my right wrist is fairly flat, I don't bend it the whole way right in my takeaway, and I don't not bend it at all and then bend it right at the end. I'm more or less going from 0 to 100 gradually during the backswing. If there was a slight caveat, I would say I wouldn't want a lot of bend during the first about foot, and then I'd be progressively adding it from there. So if there was a little tweak to that, I'd say that, hey, during the first foot till my hands are even my right thigh, not a lot of bend, and then a gradual from 0 to 100 to the top. But to keep it simple, that's what this is, simplified, gradual during the whole way. In transition, this part should be pretty simple. That right wrist should bend back to full capacity from the top of the swing by the point I get to, let's say, left arm parallel. So about the first foot of the downswing, you're gonna max out whatever's left in your right wrist by about left arm parallel or hands hip high. And then comes the last part, which is the throw piece. And there's like a lot of caveats here, okay? But the simple version is, let's assume by the time your hands are hip high that your right wrist is max bent back. If we were to look at a good pro swing, the time that the right wrist would be fully released would be roughly in here where the club's like on a 45-degree angle. So it's not fully released by the ball. My right wrist isn't fully released behind the ball. It's fully released, again, not even right after the ball. That's fully released several feet past the ball. And that's really how I would think about the throw. And it depends a little bit on where you're currently at. But if I was gonna do this in the beginning, I would get the club to about hands hip high during my downswing. My right wrist would be fully bent back. And I would practice from here, starting to let the club fully throw and release to the point where it's 45. Now my right wrist is again flat. So along the way, it's progressive like the backswing. I'm gradually from 0 to 100 letting it release. So the time I'm at impact, there's still some bend there, but it's in the process of releasing, and then it's fully released at 45. So that would be the timing aspect of the throw. Now, if you're a golfer who comes in and you throw way too early, then most certainly you need to feel like you don't throw ever. Like your right wrist stays bent back here, stays bent back here, stays bent back here, and you're throwing, if at all, way late. Here's the thing is with your right wrist, your brain's gonna throw it, okay? You're always gonna throw it. So if you throw too early, you always fix a problem by doing the opposite and exaggerating. So too much wrist throw early means never throw it at all. Of course, it's still gonna throw, but you feel like it never throws. On the opposite end, if you're someone who's way too much handle forward, right wrist way bent back, which is a very small percentage of population of golfers from my experience, then you would feel like you throw it a little bit earlier, okay? But the timing aspect of it would be that it's fully bent back by about here. It's releasing to the point where you're at impact. The right wrist is bent back, hands are over the left leg, left shoe, some shaft lean. It's still bent by the time the arm and club are in one straight line. They're still bent there. And then it's fully straightened here. And so that's how I like to practice this. Fully bent back, fully thrown. Fully bent back, fully thrown. So if you've got to make some back swings, bend it back, keep it bent back, and let it throw to here. So if you feel like there's an object maybe 2-3 feet in front of you, that club is throwing out to that point. Some coaches you'll watch really talk about they like the throw, other coaches don't throw ever. I think a lot of the times we're saying the same thing. There's just the timing aspect to it. If we look at impact, we all want the shaft lean, so just make sure the throw happens past impact. And so I would start with that like I mentioned, but I'm gonna go ahead and do a couple all the way bent back, bend it more back, let it throw. And that key point from about here, max bent back to thrown past impact is where I'm gonna put my focus here on this one. So I'm making sure it's really bent back in the early transition phase and then thrown to about there past impact. Let's go ahead and hit one with that. Yeah, and that generally feel-wise for me puts me in a pretty neutral spot at impact. So that's the right wrist simplified. Again, there's the back part and there's the up part. I want you to focus mainly on the back and forward part with the trail wrist. Let the up part take care of itself. That's for a different video. If you did enjoy this video, want to see more on the right wrist, we'll put a card on the screen at the end here with that. If you want to work with us, like I mentioned, just as good or better than in person, we're with you, guiding you there through the field, step by step, what you need to improve. I would love to see you at CogornoGolf.com. We'll put that on the screen as well.